All right, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about Contractor's Guide to Paid Ads and Search Growth. I'm Alex Stainer, your host, and we're just going to get right into it. And what we're going to cover here today, we're going to talk about why paid marketing is the key to unlimited scalability in terms of lead flow for fencing and decking businesses, and talking about the actual paid marketing strategies that are working best right now. And also, we're going to go into detail of how to set up and structure your pay-per-click campaigns to get as low a cost per lead as possible, as well as a maximum return on your investment. And then we'll also be talking about KPIs, tracking, landing pages, and a whole bunch more. Okay, if we haven't met or you haven't been on one of these webinars before, I'm Alex Stander. I'm the owner and founder of Fence and Deck Marketers. And here at FDM, we do a lot of giving back and a lot of content that we produce, not just from these webinars, but I did write the book, Best Known Fence and Deck Contractor. I have the Fence and Deck Mastery podcast. So if you're into podcasts, there's tons of guests that I brought on there. I think we're about at getting close to the 100th episode. And I do a lot of social media and love going to the shows, getting involved with the industry, and most industry shows on the fencing and decking where we go to and speak on stage there and do presentations. And of course, proud members of NADRA and the AFA. Okay, of course, Fence and Deck Marketers, we only work with fencing and decking business owners, but a lot of stuff that we'll talk about here does apply if you do other services. And in fact, a lot of our clients do other services besides just fencing and decking, but all of them do at least one of those two. All right, so to get into it, kind of a little bit of preliminary before we get into all the details of this, I want to talk about our omnipresence marketing system. So if you want to really thrive in your marketplace and be that consistent go-to company, you really need to make sure you're omnipresent. And there's a lot of ways to do that. But today we're going to be talking about that related to ads. But there's three principles basically to the system. First one is going to be maximizing opportunities. So, you're not going to grow your business. You're not going to get new business if you're not getting those opportunities. So there's so many ways to get new leads, new opportunities. Today we're going to be talking about ads, but there's things like SEO, through AI, pay-per-click, Facebook ads, local services ads, social media, and really a whole bunch more. The second is going to be maximizing your brand impressions. So if you've ever heard of the rule of seven when it comes to marketing, that's an old marketing rule, I guess. It says you have to see a business 7 times before you actually work with them. But now, since we're bombarded with ads constantly, and if you think about it, if you go on Facebook, every third post is an ad. It takes a lot more than 7 these days, and they actually said roughly 23 times it takes where you need to see a business when you're selling higher ticket items like fencing and decks. So you have to make sure you get those brand impressions and making sure you're taking that seriously. 3 is going to be maximizing the conversions. So once you get those leads coming in, you're getting those brand impressions. Once you get people coming to your website or anything that you own online, you need to make sure you're maximizing those conversions. So taking the time to understand what's going to convert somebody and actually putting that into action. So we'll talk about that quite a bit with the landing pages here. All right. So I want to see if anybody's taken advantage of paid marketing opportunities, specifically pay-per-click ads or local services ads. So put a 1 in the chat if you're doing one of these or both of them. Put in the 2 in the chat if you're not doing either. We got some 1s. Looks like some people are doing it. 2. So Luke, not doing that. Okay. So just curious what everyone's thinking. When it comes to paid ads, there's a lot of speculation. I hear a million opinions every day. So just curious what everyone thinks here. So do you think Google ads or local services ads or pay-per-click ads really drive ROI? You actually get a return on your investment. So put a 1 in the chat if you're skeptical they can drive ROI, or maybe you've had bad experiences. Put a 2 in the chat if you've had good experiences. All right. It depends. Yep, definitely depends. So I've heard no shortage of horror stories when it comes to these types of ads, both types. But if you're not running them correctly, yeah, you can get into a lot of trouble and be a good way to burn money. But we're going to be talking about best practices. First things we're going to be talking about here is the Google local services ads. Um, put a one if you're running these specifically. So if you're running local services ads right now, put a one in the chat. Put a two if you're not running them. Okay. So local services ads are excellent for fencing companies. We do run them for decking companies sometimes, but they just don't seem to be as good because there's no separate category for decking like there is for fencing. So fencing, you can specify the types of fencing leads you want specifically. Like if you only wanted installs, you didn't want repairs. Whereas decking, it's all looped under carpentry and general contracting. Um, so basically, fencing is going to be the main focus. It's not a bad idea to run them for decking. I don't know if I would pay an agency to run them for decking. I mean, it's not, you could, but the lead flow just tends to be lower. So that's why we like the pay per click. But I do want to show you basically how you can use them for fencing and kind of the intricacies related to that. So basically what Google local services ads are is they're the newer version of Google ads. So the pay-per-click ads have been around forever by Google. And kind of what it seems like happened is, there's all these websites out there that, Yelp or Home Advisor, Angie, I forget which one is even active at this point, but basically lead aggregators, where they'll sell the leads and, they're ranking on Google and then selling those leads. So Google, I think, kind of was like, hey, we own Google, so we can do the same thing and we can do it better. And I think that was kind of how Google local services ads are born. But what's great about them is they are a pay per lead system. They're not a pay per click. So they're very low risk, high reward because you're only paying once the lead actually comes in. And if you're, for example, on a fencing side and you only specify you want installations, if repairs come in, or if it's a spam lead or somebody looking for work, you can dispute it and get your money back. So they're very good in that regard. And also they show up at the very top of Google. They show the reviews, which people want to see. So all in all, they work out, they work out really well. And to run these and to become Google guaranteed, you have to do certain tests like background checks to get verified. So you'll have to do a background check, enter your contractor license, give insurance, things like that. But once you're verified, you kind of get that verification status, and that's when you can start to look better in terms of what your customer look better in front of your customers. So the reason why I would say you should choose local services ads is because Google is still the main dominant player and they still are showing local services ads at the top. So 87% of people go to Google. That number is going to start going down at least a little bit with ChatGPT and all these other AIs, but still the overwhelming favorite, especially for commercial services. So Google is the number one place where people are searching. So the ability to be on the number one place that people are searching and be at the very top, it's a very big deal and something you want to take advantage of. So that's probably the most important reason why you should be running them is because of the positioning that they have. And also these show for the best keywords. So if somebody's typing in fence company near me or deck builder near me, things like that, along with a ton of others, they're going to show the local services ads will show up at the top and make it very easy for people to click. And if you remember, it's pay per lead, so you're only paying if the lead actually comes in. So they work really well, but you do have to have a plan for them, which I'm going to explain. There are best practices and things you have to follow, so you got to make sure you're doing that. Okay, so this is just an example of return on investment that you can get from these from one of our clients. So in here, you'll see 74 leads. The conversion rate was 20%. Basically, that's what the client was telling us. So they got 74 leads and they convert 20% of them into a job. So 46 leads, it basically ends up being 15 book jobs. And if an average ticket is 10 grand, that's 150,000 in revenue. 10,000, that's more of probably a fencing one. If you're talking about decking, it'd be much higher. But this is just a ROI that we would project for this. And just kind of an example, but it's very common on the fencing side to get a lot of leads to basically generate a lot more business. So local services ads, and particularly right now with AI coming out and the changes that are being made there, basically we do expect local services ads to stick around. Google's not going to get rid of their ad programs, no matter how big the changes are with AI. So we expect these to be around. Excuse me. So when somebody's going to Google, as of right now, close to 30% of people go to the ads. So they say about 15% of people go to the local services ads, and then 11% go to the pay-per-click. However, pay-per-click ads don't always show with LSAs, so they can kind of go one or the other. So it's a significant amount of people that are going to these. And that's basically what we've seen over time is as the local services ads came out and replaced pay-per-click, or not replaced, but were added in addition to pay-per-click, they seem to work a lot better and get better leads overall, and cheaper leads in general too. So it's really shaking this up. It'll be interesting to see because right now Google's making some even bigger updates related to AI. So it'll be interesting to see how local services ads play in there, but there's no indication to think that they're going to be taking out, which wouldn't make any sense because that's how Google makes a lot of their money. So we'll just see how it goes. Okay, so this is how local services ads work. You first have to go and create an application, do the background check, submit your license, your insurance, and then background check is through Evident. Once you're approved in your area, then that's when you'll start the process of bidding on leads. As I'll explain here in a second, you do want to make sure your budget is big enough. You don't want to use a really small budget because if you have competitors using bigger ones, they'll outrank you. So it's good to have a nice, healthy budget in there. I'll talk about specifics on that in a second. But I would say 30 to 60, that's probably a little bit low now, but 60 towards the higher end there, sometimes a little bit more depending on the area. But in general, usually cheaper than pay-per-click leads a lot of times. So still pretty cost effective. And if you have your sales process dialed in, it can be a really great way to bring in more revenue. Okay, so this is kind of how they work and when you set them up, what you can look at. So as I was saying in the beginning, for the categories, fence contractor is a separate category for local services ads, whereas decks or deck builders is not. So if you want to set up for decks, you have to go under the category of carpentry and then I think general contracting and select it there. But for fencing, there is that category, so you can select that. And once you have fencing selected, that's when you want to select your subcategories. So it's like fence installation, fence repair, custom construction, other. So you want to select whatever ones relate to what you want, and you can leave the rest unchecked. Make sure you get that background check. Make sure you have your insurance. They'll ask for your certificate of insurance too. And this kind of depends on the state, but some states require licenses, some don't. If yours does, then they will ask for your license. You'll have to give them that information. And here in the overview section, these are the subcategories I was talking about here. So fence installation, fence repair, fence design, custom construction. So you would just select whatever one of those and start running ads from there. Okay, so I'm going to show you best practices, what you need to do ongoing to run these types of ads. First one is you got to dial in your profile. And one of the best ways to do this is to check your budget. So I would say on average, we usually set our average budget to around $1,500 a week. And that's not necessarily what our clients want to spend, but we've noticed that if you use a bigger budget, a lot of times, for one, the budget doesn't get spent, but two, it seems to be best to use a bigger budget to start things out because the bigger the budget, the more you compete and the better results you tend to get. And once that is, once the account is more seasoned, then you can kind of scale it back if you need to. But you want to make sure you have a nice budget. You're answering all the calls. You absolutely cannot miss any calls because you can put yourself in a really bad position. But as long as you are picking up those calls, you have a good budget, you should start to have your account get more and more seasoned over time. Um, so I outlined some of these here, well, the budget, opening up all of that, the ad schedule. So you want to make sure that schedule is set to when you can actually pick up the call. If you're closing the office at 5 and nobody's answering the phones, then that's going to be a problem if people call after that. So make sure you do it. I would, if you can get somebody to answer after hours, like an answering service, that is a good idea. You could do that as well. And then you select your job types, which we talked about, the fence installation, all of that. The service area, so you can get real specific there. I will say it's usually best to use counties and then use a big net, and then you can exclude cities or zip codes from there. Sometimes people will want to use zip codes and it just leaves holes in the map. It doesn't work as well as you'd want. So that's why I typically like to use counties. And then every service that you do, make sure you have photos set up for each one of those. That's really important in your profile. And also make sure you don't use stock images. So try to get real images, real photos for each of them. And, I would say, 3 to 5 photos for every service is probably a good starting point. Okay, so what I've seen is when people run local services ads, a lot of the times they don't keep track of everything behind the scenes. So with these types of ads, they will basically, any lead that's generated will be shown in their dashboard, Google's dashboard. And it's really important that you go in there and manage those leads. So you want to mark them as booked. I'll give you some of the different options here, but you need to make sure you are managing them, editing them, and basically telling Google what happened with them. You don't want to just leave them be and don't edit any information related to them, because if you do that, it's going to basically limit how much you can show up going forward. So going in here, every day, it depends how many leads you're getting, but every day, every couple of days. Yep, Rob. So yeah, we do manage this for you. So all the leads that come in, we basically will do all this stuff we're about to talk about. Yep. So this is kind of the checklist here of what you want to do for each job. Google will actually rate your responsiveness too. So they're going to be checking to see how quickly you complete your jobs, mark them as completed, or manage these leads. So if a job is booked, you want to mark it as booked. You want to add the customer details. So their name, I think it's name, email, there's like a notes field that should be coming up here. And then anything that was not converted, you can archive it. Here's the information here. So you have basically the customer name, the customer email, any kind of notes. So we'll add, in the notes, like what the job was about. If it was, looking for an install or somewhere in some city, you can put that there. And then you'll see you also have the recording. So they do record all the calls, which is helpful as well. That's going to allow you to kind of pinpoint them and see. And what you can also do if you're using call tracking, you can actually forward these leads to your call tracking software too. So you have them in both spots, which is how we do it. And then another piece of this you can see here in the top right is the rate this lead. So if the lead was not good, wasn't someone that you were going to do work with, or was somebody looking for repair and you said you didn't want repairs, anything that would qualify as a bad lead, basically you can come in here and rate the lead as very satisfied to very dissatisfied. This can be ways to get your refunds. It's not always perfect, but this can be ways to kind of get your money back and let them know. Also, Google will monitor this themselves and see if that call wasn't qualified. And sometimes they'll give you your money back without you having to do this. But if it doesn't work out that way, you always have this process too. So, I said this is not a perfect thing. It's not like this is 100% accurate, but you shouldn't be charged for unqualified leads, any leads that are outside your area, not a service you provide. And then you can kind of rate those leads based on the quality. So you should be able to get your money back for those leads that you didn't want to, or that didn't meet your qualifications. Okay, so the next piece is going to be reviews, just like I say in just about everything, how important reviews are. They're extremely important local services ads. I have seen that the companies that just have a ton of Google reviews tend to get the most leads too and rank the best. So that's a great way to do it. But there are ways to get Google verified reviews with local services ads too. So these are the most powerful review you can get for your local services ads account. But basically what you can do is if the job closed and everything was good, once it's closed, you'll see the ability to basically send them a link to leave a review, and that will be considered a verified review. So this is kind of similar to how Amazon has like their verified purchase or whatever they call it, that orange text. This is a way that Google's doing it to like verify that they actually used you and all went well. So this is a really good idea too. But in general, what we've seen, if you just get a lot of reviews, it should help you out too. So got to get those consistent with lead flow. All right. Yep, just talked about this. Number of reviews, a major driver. Uh, the service that you provide, all of that stuff is going to, if you start getting a lot of bad reviews, it's going to hurt you on local services ads, just like it's going to hurt you everywhere. So you always got to make sure you're providing good service and keeping those bad reviews away. And use that dashboard to fill out the information, get the reviews, all that stuff. That's what's going to help separate you, especially if you have competition that's using this, pretty thoroughly. And that's just what it looks like. So if you get a Google verified job or review, it'll say this was a verified job and basically someone that they worked with. Okay, so this is like a little bit of a piece here that make sure you're paying attention to. Although you might not book at 85%, what we've seen is you want to at least tell Google you are booking that much. So the higher the booking rate is, the more Google's hearing that you're booking jobs, you're getting basically getting people to see your, or you're going out for an estimate or whatever. So they don't want to see that you're just declining every single job because that's going to limit how many more they send to you. So what we say is try to target around an 85% booking rate. And you can do all of that by going into the dashboard and marking the lead as booked. All right, so that was local services ads. If you have any questions, feel free to put that in the chat. But next, what we're going to be doing is all about pay-per-click ads. So put a 1 in the chat if you are confident in pay-per-click ads or you've seen good results and you see the value in them. Put a 2 if you're skeptical about them. Put a 3 if you think they're just a bad idea. Haven't seen anything good from them. So 1 good, 2 3 is bad. I'm going to talk about pay-per-click ads, get into some specifics here and how they can be great or how they can be horrible. So I definitely understand with all the 2s because they can kind of go either way. But the great things about pay-per-click ads is you start showing up quickly. So with SEO, ranking on Google and ranking in AI, it all takes a lot more time. With pay-per-click ads, you kind of just start running them, getting leads quickly, and getting that return on the investment if you're doing them right. Also, you can kind of show up as often as you want where the customers are looking. So, there's no real limitation on how often you can show up. And basically, you can just, as long as you keep paying, Google's going to keep showing your ads. And also, you can show up anywhere you want using different keywords. So people could search fencing company and be located in a certain city that's 20 miles or 50 miles away from you, and you can still show up for that keyword. Whereas with SEO, that's not possible. But in general, the scalability is pretty much unlimited. You can spend a ton of money on these. With clients that'll spend 40 grand a month or more, and is how they built $20 million companies. So it is absolutely possible, but you have to know what you're doing. You have to understand them. And if you don't, there's a good chance you could be burning through some money. All right, so here's the reasons why a lot of these fail, basically. So Put a one in the chat if you've done them, if you've done pay-per-click ads and they have failed, or you felt like they failed. All right, so no ones. I guess nobody's trying them. All right. Um, Number one would be understanding or failure to understand the AdWords auction process and just the specifics of the fencing and decking industry. So understanding which keywords, I guess, need to be used and just how people are bidding on these keywords, that can get you into a lot of trouble. Also, a lot of times what we'll see is, one campaign or one ad group for everything. So all of the services all going to the same thing. That can get you into a lot of trouble because you want to make sure you're bidding on different keywords, but whatever they are typing in, they go to an ad that's talking about that keyword specifically, and then go to a website page or a landing page that's talking about that too. You don't want everything to be very generic and all combined. Also, Chad kind of just talked about that. The specific text ads and landing pages, those should be grouped together. And then making sure the call to action, all of that is strong on the landing pages, which we'll talk about here in a sec. Okay, so probably the number one thing I would say, or at least top three, is most people send all of their ads to the landing page, or sorry, to the website page, the home page of the website. That's a problem because if you're doing keywords for, all these different types of fencing, different material types, or maybe you're doing decking too, and everything's going to a homepage. And on that homepage, it's just talking about all kinds of stuff. It's not specific to one thing. It's talking about all the different fencing, decking work you do, commercial, residential. What you want to do is, as an example, would be talking about a specific type of thing, like, maybe wood fencing or vinyl fencing, and then going to a page that's talking about that specifically. And also ads that are talking about that specifically. So it should all be kind of a uniform ordeal. Somebody types in fence company near me, and then they go to an ad that's talking about how you're the number one fence company in whatever city. Then they go to a landing page that shows off why you're, this great fencing company or decking company, that kind of thing. So if all of those pieces are kind of in sync, that's what's going to allow you to get better results versus going to a website page where they can get kind of confused. And I'll actually show you here in a second what the landing pages we create look like, so you can kind of get an idea. And this here is just another example. So basically just an example client. So 46 leads, if they converted 20%, so that would basically be 10 jobs. If the average ticket is 30, which is pretty common for decks, about 300,000. So 35 times basically is what they're looking at. So you basically, with these, you just need to make sure you have your sales process dialed in. So there's no sense in paying for pay-per-click leads if you're not going to end up, calling them back, following up, all of those things. It's not enough to just follow up once. You need to have that process where you keep going on back to them and trying to capitalize on that lead. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how to set up and structure these, because if you do this correctly, you're going to be very far ahead compared to most people. Biggest thing, you want to make sure you have a way to track this. So you don't want to get into pay-per-click ads without having a very clear way of how to track the leads and how things are performing. So you want to make sure you're tracking that. You want to break everything into smaller groups, like I was saying. You don't want to have one big group for every keyword, and make sure the keywords are correct. You want to make sure the text ads are legit and matching the landing pages and the keywords you're searching for. We'll talk about the ad extensions here in a second, and then we'll talk about the landing pages too, and how to split test them. So I'm going to go into more detail here in a second on these. So first one is going to be conversion tracking. Put a one in the chat if you've ever used conversion tracking for anything. Like use separate tracking phone numbers for maybe not pay-per-click ads, but for SEO or anything. Just curious if anybody's ever used that. Just put a one in the chat if you have. Okay, good. So you want to do the same thing with these. We use company called What Converts, but there's others like CallRail, Go High Level. There's other ways to do this, but this is going to be a way to actually accurately track that information and also send that information to Google, because that's going to help you improve your campaigns over time. So it's really important to do. The conversion tracking we use, they use dynamic number swapping. So what basically this means is if you put this code on your website landing page, What Converts, our tracking software, will change that phone number depending on where you came from. So depending on what type of ad you came from, you can basically share, you can go to that landing page and the software automatically changes that number so that way it can be recorded properly and sent back to Google. Same thing with web forms. We can track all that. So when a web form is submitted, we can associate that lead to wherever the campaign came from. And this is crucial because this is really the only way to get that accurate data that actually shows how many legitimate leads came in. But even more important, these can show what were legit leads and what might have been spam. So you don't want to track your Google ads by just saying, if somebody clicks the phone number on my landing page, let's call that a lead, because they could have hung up or it could have been a mistake or whatever. So you want to actually track how long they've been on the call. Usually it's like 30 seconds to decide if that actually was a lead. So there's all these ways to make sure you're doing that properly. Some of the most important KPIs, I would say, definitely total spend. You don't want to spend more than you're able to spend. But you want to know if those landing pages are converting. So you want to make sure all that's working well. You want to know what the cost per lead is. It varies depending on markets, but for decking, I would say under 200, maybe 150. And then for fencing, closer to 100 or less would be good. And all of these things are important. You want to know the cost per lead, how much you're spending, conversion rates. But at the end of the day, you need to track this as an investment. So once you know where these leads are coming from, you want to have it in your CRM to know, which leads came from where, and then track that to when the job was actually completed so you can see what the actual end return was. So there's lots of ways to do this, and you want to make sure you are doing it so you actually know if you're making money, because you could have great metrics and all those things, low cost per lead, but if you're not actually making money, if you're not closing it, then that's a problem. And it might not be the ad agency or whatever, could be your sales process, but you want to at least know what's going on and if you're making money off it to see what you got to fix. Okay, so basically with keyword types, so you can do broad, phrase, or exact match. In general, phrase match tends to be the best option. With broad, you give Google too much flexibility. For example, if you're choosing fencing company, they could bring back anything that Google thinks is related to fencing or a fencing company. That could be fencing the store, the sport. It could be supply stores, informational stuff around fencing. So it's very, very broad. Phrase match is a little bit more dialed in. So if you use fencing company as a phrase match, they might show for like fence replacement or vinyl fence replacement, fence contractor, things like that. So those can work out better. Exact match, very limited. You can add some of those, but you don't want to have that as a primary strategy because you're not going to show for a whole lot. And once you have your keywords entered, what you'll quickly see is you didn't predict the future, and there's all these keywords that you're showing up for that you didn't want. So very important with pay-per-click ads is you add negative keywords. So really every day when you're getting going, you should be going in there and adding negative keywords for anything that doesn't make sense, like competitor names or somebody looking for a career, a job, or association, distributors. There's a million different things it could be. You want to make sure you're consistently going in there and adding those negative keywords, because when you do that over time, your ads will start to get better and better, and you'll get lower cost per leads and just better results overall. Okay, so when we're setting this up, we have the separate campaigns, we have the keywords. Now we need to start taking those keywords and showing the ads that should show for those keywords. So in general, less is more. They have a limited number of characters you can use. You don't have to max everything out, just something brief and to the point. Um, you want to tell them exactly what you want them to do. So whatever call to action you want to make sure that's available to click and go to the landing page or wherever you want them. If you have any kind of special offer, you can also put that in there. That can help too, like 1,000 off a new fence or something like that. And basically whatever you want them to do most is what you want to kind of push them in that area. And then once they get to the website, or sorry, to the landing page, you want to make sure they don't click around. You want to make sure you show them very clearly what you want to do, whether it's give you a call or fill out a form. You want to have those call to actions very obvious, which I'll show you here in a sec. Okay, so here's just a couple examples, Baltimore's deck installer, number one deck installer, that kind of thing. You can see there's some, I think this was just, I don't know why they were talking about bathrooms. Maybe they do those too. I don't know. But, you can have, that's kind of weird. That's for a decking company, but you can have those deals I was talking about, for whatever services you offer down in there. And then these are individual links that can go to specific pages or sections on your landing page. So if you have one landing page, you can click Why Choose Us, go to that landing page and scroll down to, what's different about you. Also, there's multiple places you can show up with Google Ads. So it's not just like the standard option here, but you can also show up in the map pack. So if somebody types in fence company near me and you see the map pack, there's 3 Google listings, you can actually show up in there as well. And that's a really, really good idea and something I would highly recommend doing because it kind of blends in there nicely. It shows off the reviews and looks pretty good. Okay, so these are some different call extensions. So you have different ways. Basically, you can include your phone number, some site links. These are all the things I was talking about here before. But you can enter all this information in your Google ad to help get more conversions. So these are just ways to stand out. This is kind of how it looks, the different extensions that you can use. Something you can just check on Google. It's probably easier than following this thing, but make sure you set those extensions too. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of a landing page here. So, you want to have some kind of title here. You'll see that you have the big phone number, the logo. There's not a bunch of pages to click around. So we're really just focusing on, how great they are, the reviews, a form, more testimonials, what's unique about them, some team photos, what you're offering exactly, the materials you offer, your process, your service areas, and some photos. So this is just one thing that we've seen work really well. You don't need to overload this with content because you don't need that to rank. You're paying Google to rank. It's not like Google like ranking for SEO. So these are just some examples here you can use. Okay, so this is just kind of a recap, best ways to structure everything. So make sure you have that conversion tracking. You want to make sure they're separated into different ad groups. You want to make sure those keywords are right and you're using the right match types. I would say using broad match is a very common mistake we see. You can use them, you just have to know what you're doing. And if you run broad match, you're going to open it up to all kinds of bad clicks. So be careful with that. And then make sure the ads match the keywords and then make sure the landing pages match what the searcher is searching. And really go through that landing page and make sure it looks good. And then you can also do some split testing, see what's working, try different designs, things like that to get the best result. Okay, so if you've ever thought about using an agency to run your pay-per-click ads or somebody other than us or us, here's some good questions that you can kind of ask to see how good they are, because I can tell you firsthand, it's very hard to find someone that's very good with pay-per-click ads. So you need to make sure they really know their stuff. And here's a couple of questions you can ask. One thing that's relatively common with agencies is they will do a management, they will combine the ad spend and the management fee. So they could say, hey, give me $4,000, but they don't tell you how much of that is going to their management and how much goes to the actual Google. So it's best to know what that split is. So you know you're not paying too much for the management and not enough is going to the ad spend. Also make sure the tracking is in place. You know, how they'll do that. Are they going to track the actual calls that come in, web forms? Another very, very common thing I see is when I'm auditing pay-per-click campaigns is the tracking is just not set up properly. And I would say in probably the majority of cases, the numbers might look really good. They got these low cost per leads, but the tracking isn't set up properly, or they're ranking, getting really bad leads or something. So I will say that the tracking metrics can be misleading. So you got to make sure that's in order, and make sure you know how to track those KPIs. See if they're setting up those landing pages or if they're sending it to the home page. See if they'll be doing any kind of split texting or using ad extensions. And a big one is knowing what is their target in terms of cost per lead. You know, it's going to vary depending on the market, but they know what they're doing. They should have some idea of like what to expect in terms of cost per lead. So make sure you know that, and you know, you can track that to your ROI once you have that too. Okay, so curious what everyone thought as we're getting towards the end here. Anything that stuck out? Any kind of takeaways? Anything you might not have known before that kind of stood out? Anything like that that you want to share? Feel free to type that in the chat if you'd like.
I think you did a really good job of explaining them there, Alex.
Thanks, feel that. All right. Well, if you guys have any questions, so basically right now we're kind of in the middle of the year and spring is kind of winding down. So things aren't going the way you want, or you want to see how you can finish stronger or get ready for next year, whatever the case may be, feel free to reach out and we can do a ranking report for you and go over your pay-per-click ads, all of this stuff. So we'll give you access to everything that we look for and let you know what's kind of missing, where the holes are. And we'll also figure out what your goals are and you know what can be changed to hit those. Um, this right here. So if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out. And actually, I'll do one better. If you do want to get audited, you know, have us audit your stuff, or if you want us to create a custom growth plan for your business, feel free to scan that QR code and set up a quick call with us so we can ask you some questions and get some information for you so we can create this plan. This plan will be custom to you. It won't be some kind of cookie cutter plan. We want to know what your goals are, what you're trying to do, and then we'll make our plan based off of that. So feel free to scan that QR code there, and I'll leave it up on the screen. But other than that, that's pretty much it. If nobody has any questions, I hope you got some value from this, and you know, it was worth the time. And feel free to reach out here through our website at deckfencemarketers.com. And yeah, that's it. I'll stay on here for a minute, and Matilda, I guess you can keep an eye out for that if anybody scans or wants to
Yep.
scan the QR code.
Absolutely. And if you need to jump off, Alex, as well, I can stay behind and just monitor the chat.
All right, sounds good. Well, thanks for everybody for attending. We'll see you next month with a new topic, and hope everyone has a good week. Take care.